I'm not about to launch a dedicated to the bizarre or unsettling experiences I've encountered, nor do I plan on writing about the paranormal events I supposedly witnessed. The truth is, my life has been fairly uneventful up until now. Sure, I won't deny them both superstitious and religious, but my beliefs stem more from faith than from any tangible proof. That being said, a little background might be helpful. I live at the far end of a small neighborhood, with only a stretch of woods and an occupied house waiting to be sold behind my home. In front of me lies a quiet, almost lifeless street lined with no more than half a dozen houses. Oddly enough, the residents of these homes seem to be absent most of the time, but I guess that's just the reality of working a typical 9-to-5 job. Honestly, I find the emptiness rather peaceful. There's something strangely comforting about a little solitude, though I can't quite put it into words. However, it was one particular night that disrupted this sense of calm. It's strange how, despite how significant that night was, I can't recall the exact date. I just remember being up late close to midnight. My parents, exhausted from their day, had reminded me not to stay up too long. Before heading to bed, they also asked me to take the dogs out for a walk, and in exchange for my late-night freedom, I agreed. After watching Netflix for a while, I glanced at the clock on the TV screen and noticed that nearly an hour had passed since my parents went to sleep. Feeling a bit drowsy myself, I decided it was fine to take the dogs out. Grabbing the leashes, I stepped outside, walking down the long gravel driveway until I reached the street. The beam from my flashlight to the dogs has guided it on the dogs along the quiet road, letting them do their business. But that night, something felt different. I turned to head back to the house, but the moment my flashlight swept across a particular spot in the road, I froze. Just a few feet ahead of me, something small lay on the ground, something that hadn't been there before. My dogs noticed it too. They strained against their leashes, trying to reach whatever it was, and I had to use all my strength to hold them back. Deciding it was best to get them inside first, I quickly led them back to the house before returning to investigate. As I approached down, letting my flashlight fully illuminate the object, the moment I saw it, my stomach twisted into knots. It was a baby frog. It lay belly up, motionless. At first, I assumed a predator gone to it, but something about the scene didn't sit right with me. The frog's body was still intact, no signs of it being eaten. However, clean sitting down its stomach, its tiny intestines spilling out beside it. Its eyes were missing too. If the frog had been larger, maybe I would have thought much of it. But given its small size, the injuries felt deliberate, intentional. A shiver ran through me. I had seen enough. Revulsion of the moment's hesitation, I turned on my heated back inside, making sure to lock the doors behind me. I couldn't explain why, but I felt like I needed to. The next morning, as I stepped off the school, I had back at the spot where I had seen the frog. It was gone. Not a single trace remained. I figured that whatever killed it must have come back and removed the remains. On my way to the bus stop, I kept my eyes open for any other signs of dead animals on the road, but I found nothing. Once I was home, I decided to bring it up to my mom. Maybe she'd have an explanation I hadn't thought of. She listened carefully as I recounted the story. Then after a moment of thought, she offered a simple suggestion. Maybe it was a neighbor's cat. I nodded, accepting my mom's explanation. Cats are known for hunting and sometimes killing small animals just for sport. That night, and for several nights after, I noticed the frogs again. They kept appearing on the road, always within close range of my house. The sight still unsettled me, but I chose to ignore it. I kept walking the roads as usual, refusing to let it bother me. Then came a morning that changed everything. It started like any other school day. I woke up, showered, got dressed, and breakfast my teeth. Everything was normal. But as I stepped outside, ready to head to the bus stop, I made it only a few steps down the driveway before stumbling back in horror. Lying in front of me was a squirrel, cleanly severed in half. Its body was split with eerie precision, the two halves perfectly symmetrical. A dark pool of blood surrounded it, and its face was frozen in an expression of pure terror. My stomach churned, and I nearly gagged. With audacity and riposted, pulling out my phone, text my mom. There's a mutilated squirrel right in front of our driveway. I hurried to the bus stop, anxiously waiting for her reply. A few minutes later, she responded, saying she would check it out. Then came another message that made my blood run cold. Where exactly did the text? Confused. How could she miss something so grotesque? I quickly described the exact spot. I knew what I had seen, and was no way she could have looked it or waited. Her next message sent chills down my spine. There's nothing here. I felt the color drain from my face. My heart pounded as I'd read her words, trying to make sense of them. The image of the lifeless squirrel, its twisted, bloodied body, was still fresh in my mind. That day at school, I tried asking a few friends if they had ever experienced anything similar, but they all looked at me like I was crazy. Not one of them knew what I was talking about. And then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The following nights were quiet. The eerie sightings ceased, and I could never shake the feeling that something I couldn't explain, had happened. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or if I should have been afraid. For a while, everything returned to normal. No more frogs. No more mutilated animals on the road. Even on my daily walks to school, I saw nothing out of the ordinary. It was as if whatever strange force had been at play had simply stopped. And for that, I was grateful. Looking back, I was nay think it was truly over. I should have realized that it wasn't the end of the storm, just the calm before it. And that uneasy peace shattered just 2 weeks ago on a night that seemed no different from any other. This time, my dad was the one taking the dogs out. I was left with different tasks urging the mail. I had put it off earlier in the day, and now, thanks to my procrastination, I was stuck retrieving it at midnight. Annoyed, I sighed no, I wouldn't be able to sleep until I got it done. I started down the road at a leisurely pace, but as I moved forward, my steps quickened. The woods flanked both sides of the street, the towering trees stretching high above me, the branches shifting ever so slightly in the wind. A creeping unease settled in my chest. I felt watched. The streetlights had already shut off for the night, leaving me with only the faint glow of my phone to light the way. My dad had taken the flashlight for walking the dogs, so I had to make do. Every muscle in my body was tensed, adrenaline coursing through me, ready to send me sprinting at the first unfamiliar sound. But the silence was almost worse. The entire neighborhood was eerily still. Too still. It made the air feel heavier, and darkness somehow thicker. I refused to let my nerves get the best of me. Finally, I reached the mailbox. Sliding my key into the lock, I twisted and pulled the door open. Reaching inside, I expected to feel the familiar crisp edges of envelopes or packages. Instead, my fingers brushed against something soft, something wet. My breath hitched as I yanked a hand back instinctively, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. I took a shaky step backward, lifting my phone to shine its dim lighting side. And when I saw what was waiting for me in the mailbox, it took everything in me not to scream. Inside the mailbox, the one only had the key to open as a frog. I didn't stop to process it. My body moved before my mind could catch up. Without hesitation, I've turned and sprinted as my legs will carry me, tearing down the road toward my house. My heart pounded in my chest. My breath came in ragged gasps. But I didn't slow down. I practically launched my foot up the stairs, yanking open the door and slamming it shut behind me, locking it. My breathing was erratic, my entire body trembling. My parents, startled by my dramatic entrance, gave me puzzled looks. I forced out a nervous laugh, quickly making up an excuse. Something about being exhausted from running home. Whether they actually believed me, or were simply too tired to question why I had been running at midnight, they didn't press the issue. Without another word, they headed off to bed, and double-checked the lock on the door before retreating to my room. At some point, I must have drifted off. The next thing I remember is waking up drenched in sweat. Disoriented, I sat up, blinking in the pitch-black darkness of my room. My body felt heavy, my mind sluggish, until I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps climbing the wooden stairs leading up to the front door. I held my breath, my pulse thundering in my ears. And came the sound that sent pure terror surging through me, an unmistakable, agonizingly slow creak of the front door opening. My stomach's twisted into knots. Our brains screamed at me to put to hide, to pretend hadn't heard anything at all. But my body betrayed me. Before I knew it, I was standing, my bedroom door swinging open. And then the barking started. My dogs were downstairs barking furiously, but something was wrong. Their barking wasn't just loud, it was distorted. Then the barking changed. It became full whispers. And then came the screaming. A blood-curdling, the-wrenching scream that ripped through the silence, making my heart stop cold. At the worst part, it didn't sound like Mike Doshin, sounded human, against all logic, against every ounce of self-preservation. I found myself running to the living room. And that's when I saw them. My dogs, they were sitting there, trembling, their bodies covered in fresh cuts and bruises. Deep scratches marred their fur. Their eyes were wide, almost vacant, as if they were trapped in some kind of invisible paralysis. They didn't move. They couldn't move. And then the mouths hung open, yet the horrifying, human screams of agony still poured from their throats. I moved toward them, my feet dragging across the carpet in slow, deliberate steps. With every inch I closed between us, their screams grew louder, more desperate, more violent, until suddenly, a sickening crack through the room. Their jaws unhinged, their mouths stretched impossibly wide, revealing something grotesque, something I couldn't comprehend. Again, as if possessed by some unnatural force, they stood, not on all fours, but on 2 feet, like a person. The human-like groans of suffering to something else entirely. An ungodly, inhuman screech so piercing that pain shot through my skull. I clutched my head, my ears ringing as though they might split open. And then, silence. Without warning, the bodies collapsed, lifeless, crumpling to the floor. I lurched forward instinctively, reaching out for Made-It. Something grabbed me from behind. Its grip was unnatural, its appendages tightening around my body like coils of living rope. Before I could scream, I felt something sharp sink into me, piercing, stabbing, tearing through my flesh. Agony erupted through my body. At the sound that tore from my throat, wasn't mine, it wasn't human. It was the same monstrous, unearthly shriek I had just heard from my dogs. The world around me twisted, my vision darting at the edges. My limbs felt numb, my body felt wrong, and just as the last flicker of light faded, I woke up. I shot upright in bed, gasping for air. My entire body was drenched in sweat, with shaking hands up my face, feeling the dampness pooling under my brow. It had been a dream, just a dream, but it felt too real. Heart hammering, I bolted and rushed to the living room. There, in their beds, my dogs lay sound asleep, breathing peacefully. For the next several nights, I barely slept. I couldn't shake the fear that night was more than just my imagination. But I never told anyone, not until now. And then, the woods behind my house changed. And wasn't anything obvious. No strangers, though shelly creatures lurking in the darkness. But my dogs knew. Every time I walked them near the tree line, they would stop and would freeze, tails between the legs, their eyes locked onto something invisible within the void of the forest. And then they would whimper. I started to feel it too. A creeping unease, a sense of something watching. Some just beyond sight, hidden among the towering trees. There was no logical reason to be afraid. Nothing had actually happened, but the woods felt different now, more ominous, more wrong, and I couldn't explain why. I can't go near the woods anymore without a deep, unsettling chill creak in my dogs. Once again, the eerie calm before the storm settled in. Each uneventful day, each quiet night, felt more agonizing and vast, like the tension before something terrible. No matter how much time passed, the nightmare stayed with me. It consumed my thoughts, gnawed at the edges of my mind, and my sleepless nights started to take their toll. It showed. At school, I could barely keep my eyes open. After multiple detentions for failing in class, my grades plummeted. My parents grew concerned, but I never told them the truth. How could I? They'd never believe me, especially since seemed to be the only one experiencing this. I'm only bringing this up now because, well, I'm starting to get scared again. The strange occurrences have started up once more. As recently as a week ago, I began noticing them. At first it was subtle, just a feeling of unease. A heightened sense of awareness of the dead animals started appearing again, and it's not just frogs anymore. Now I'm finding birds, small squirrels, each night, and there are more of them, and each night they inch closer and closer to my house. And don't know if this is the work of some deranged person, playing a sick joke on me, or if something far worse is happening in my neighborhood. But here's what I do evidence. Every single time I see one of these bodies, by morning they're gone. No remains, no trace. This isn't the work of a cat. And last night was the worst part. Something familiar, something terrifying. I woke up to the sound of wood creaking. The wooden stairs leading up to my house, foops, sloovy, deliberate. They stopped just outside my front door. I couldn't bring myself to move. I didn't have the courage to go and check, to toast them or see what was waiting for me on the other side. So, instead, I did the only thing I could do. I peeped through my bedroom window. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, through the dim glow of my window, I spotted something, lumped resting on the welcome mat just outside my door. I couldn't make out its exact shape or details, but deep down I already knew. And because of that, I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. When morning finally arrived, I hesitated before stepping outside. My heart pounded as I slowly unlocked the door and peered out. Nothing. Not a single trace of what I had seen hours before. And that's when it hit me. I had never heard anything go back down the stairs. A tight, sickening knot twisted in my stomach. I don't know what's going to happen tonight, but I have a feeling it won't be good. No one would believe me. Not my parents, not my friends, not anyone. And that in revolting could help me at this point. So, I'm preparing the only way I know how. I've loaded my rifle. My hatchet and knife are within reach. The doors will be locked. I don't know if any of it will matter. I just know I can't sit here and do nothing. All I can think about is that nightmare. Small update. At the last second, I decided to let my dogs feed in my room. I locked the door behind me. Call it paranoia if you want, but at this point, I refused to take any chances. The night passed in total silence. No creaking stairs, no footsteps, nothing. I didn't sleep at all. Eventually, exhaustion won. Around 4 a.m., I finally body succumbed to rest. And when I woke up this morning to get ready for school, there, just outside my bedroom door, a mutilated frog